Right. OCO, hello everyone. I'm Jen Deerinwater. I'm the founding executive director of Crushing Colonialism, and I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. Crushing Colonialism is committed to the full inclusion of our community members. So we have live English and Spanish captioning, Spanish translation, and American Sign Language interpretation. You turn on the captioning by clicking the captioning button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Then you'll click on either subtitle or view full transcript. You choose your language interpretation by clicking the globe icon and then choosing the language you want to hear, and you then mute yourself. And during tonight's event, we'll have 2 1-minute breaks for our interpreters and captioners. For our blind attendees, each speaker will give a description of what we look like and what is around us, and then we'll get started with their conversations. So I'll begin by describing myself. I'm a light-complected native Two-Spirit woman. I have brown hair that's pulled back in a bun. I'm wearing black, pink, yellow, and turquoise earrings. And I have on a turquoise shirt and a black cardigan over it. So Crushing Colonialism's mission is to uplift and tell the stories of Indigenous people through multimedia work while supporting those doing the work. Our organization is founded and operated by Indigenous people working in a variety of media fields across the world. We work to increase the pay and employment of Indigenous media makers while also promoting their work and increasing access to professional representation. In doing this, we control our narratives in order to crush colonialism. Now, I'm especially delighted to bring you all the 3 R's: realize, recognize, and reconciliation to the world. This 5-day virtual event series covers reproductive justice issues Indigenous people across the so-called Americas are facing. Every day covers a related topic with diverse Indigenous people speaking their truths. The 3 R's has been a labor of love, organized in partnership with Joy Braun, Lorraine Clements, and Valerie Proctor. We've had to change this event over time due to the COVID-19 pandemic and a lack of resources. Unfortunately, along the way, we lost a Métis elder, Velma Orvis, who was originally scheduled as a speaker. In many ways, the struggles we've encountered organizing this event are tied to the genocide Indigenous people are still suffering. We're focusing on reproductive justice issues as these are directly tied to this genocide. The organization Sister Song defines reproductive justice as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. The 3 R's is generously sponsored by the LGBTQ Task Force, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, DC Diverse City Fund, the Campaign for Southern Equality, the Washington Office on Latin America, the Civil Liberties and Public Policy Conference and Program at Amherst College, and the North American Indian Center of Boston. And today, myself, Madonna Thunderhawk, and Shaila Winter Manitowabie are discussing the colonizer theft of Indigenous children. Shaila is from the Wickwayimacon First Nation, and I apologize if I said that incorrectly. So First Nation in so-called Canada and is Bear Clan. She's a model, singer, artist, activist, and human trafficking survivor. Shaila was honored the task of handing over the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls inquiries calls to justice to Canada's Prime Minister in June 2019. She speaks publicly at rallies and events to raise awareness about missing and murdered Indigenous women and human sex trafficking. She's passionate about using her experiences to help bring attention to ongoing violence against Indigenous and non-Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersex, and asexual peoples. As a singer, Shaila won the Indigenous History Month's talent show in 2018 in Toronto. So Madonna Thunderhawk is a veteran of every modern Native occupation from Alcatraz to Wounded Knee in 1973, and more recently the No Dapple protest at Standing Rock. Born and raised across the Oceti-Sakowee homelands, she first became active in the late 1960s as a member and leader in the American Indian movement, and co-founded Women of All Red Nations and the Black Hills Alliance. An eloquent voice for Native resistance and sovereignty, Thunderhawk has spoken around the world and served as a delegate to the United Nations in Geneva. She currently works as the tribal liaison for the Lakota People's Law Project. She established the Wasijia Najin, and once again, I apologize if I didn't say that correctly, but it translates to grandmother's group on the Cheyenne River Reservation to assist in rebuilding kinship networks. She has partnered to develop the Simply Smiles Children's Village, a first of its kind intentional community of Native foster families. Madonna is a principal in the Warrior Women Project, a collective for the development of scholarship, media, and activism. So welcome, Madonna and Shaila. So excited to have you both here. So would you please begin by describing yourself and your surroundings? And when you speak throughout the night, please say your name when you start speaking for anyone who cannot see you.
Okay, I guess I will go first.
Why don't you kick us off, Shaila?
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Shaila, and I'll describe myself for our blind listeners. So I am wearing beaded earrings that were gifted to me, and they have the rainbow on them, and I'm wearing a blue shirt, and my hair is tied back, and my hair is brown. I'm a light skin Ojibwe woman, and I have a Mohawk flag in the back that was gifted to me, and there's a lamp. I have a lamp here that is it's just a lamp. Sorry, I never had to describe my surroundings. I am in a basement apartment in Toronto, where it is winter almost 6 months out of the year. So I'm cozy in my home, and I'm very excited to speak here and just do my part to raise awareness for our Indigenous peoples here on Turtle Island. So Chimiigwech, thank you for having me here, and you did pronounce Wickwamcom almost good, but it was still good. It was better than most people. And my last name, Shaila Manitowabie, you pronounced my name very well, so thank you for that. Chimiigwech.
So Madonna, would you like to describe yourself and your surroundings as well before we get started with our conversation?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you. Very honored to be here. I appreciate the invite. Yeah, I'm an elder of my reservation is the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation. That's the federal government's title for us. I remember Oceti-Sakowee, 7 council fires of the Great Sioux Nation. Yeah, I'm an elder. I have gray hair. And I'm sitting here with my regular clothes. I've got an apron on and kind of a mostly denim overshirt. I'm here on a different reservation, the Pine Ridge Reservation, in a community called Thunder Valley. It's a community, an amazing community of, trying to reestablish our original lifeways and social ways, as opposed to what's been going on with cluster housing and stuff that the federal government has done on reservations. But anyway, my granddaughter works here. She lives here. She's buying a home. One of the first generation of people, their little community here are all young people that are buying their homes. First for many of families, for that to happen. So I'm here to take care of great granddaughters. while my granddaughter works, because of the COVID, they can't go to school, and which is good. They stay home and they do their online classes. So yeah, that's me. That's what I'm doing.
Right, Wado, thank you. I forgot to mention that I am coming to you all from Washington, D.C., which is occupied Piscataway land. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you both. Whether it's boarding or residential schools, the U.S. immigration and custom enforcement detention facilities, the foster system or trafficking, our Indigenous children are still being taken from us. And this is particularly devastating for Indigenous people here in the so-called U.S., as 42% of our Native population is age 24 or younger. So Madonna, you've dedicated so much of your life to fighting for Indigenous rights, especially for our children. Would you start us off by talking about, the current condition of Native youth's lives, where we stand on these issues, especially as we're in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I can, I suppose, just speak for, my reservation and the community that I work in. Um, but it seems like most of our communities, Native, Indigenous, whatever title, communities and reservations, and we all deal with the same federal policies. So a lot of that, of course, affects, our societies and stuff. And the young people are really having a rough time, especially, on the average anyway, generally speaking. But because of COVID, it's just, worse. It's just havoc for them. As many of them have to, they're not doing regular classes, so they have to do it online, and that's another issue. Many of the homes are very very dysfunctional, so they don't have that, atmosphere and support system. So it's really rough for them, and most of the young people that I've dealt with. Now this is the it seems like it's more of a culture thing now that I can see, because we were struggling anyway to try to maintain the value system of our ancestors that they left us. But with COVID and other things happening, it's just made it harder and worse for us to try to do what we can. And as an elder group, our grandmother's group is Washagya Naji. That means stand strong. So what we found out is most of our group we have two parts to our group. We have the OGs, and that's myself and others. We're the old grandmas, and we're the ones that are, either have Social Security or we have the time to go. This was before COVID, to go to tribal council meetings and to go to district meetings, community meetings, that type of thing. And then our OGs and then our YGs are the young grandmas, but they're all working, most of them. Plus they're raising grandchildren, and that's another thing. Grandparents are raising grandkids, and sometimes they even have their grown children living with them. So it's a very tough situation that's going on right now. So, but you do what you can, and that's what we're doing. So what can we do? We partnered with Simply Smiles, a non-Native organization that comes to our reservation, to our community area on the east end of the reservation. They've been coming for about 12 years, just in the summertime, and they have a summer camp for kids, a day camp, and that's all they do is just do activities with children. So we partnered with them because we saw the need for children's homes village, so that the South Dakota Department of Services, Social Services, that's been trafficking in our children since day one, they're still at it. They're still doing it. So we figured that we could try to do what we can in working with our tribal court system, if we can help to keep the children on the reservation once they're taken from the home and not sent off the reservation. So that's what the children village is about, and we probably would have had most of the houses up and stuff. It wasn't for COVID, but we've got one house already built, and we've got a kinship parent. We don't call them foster. We're trying to rebuild kinship relationships. So that's what we're doing. And our young people that come there, it'll be their home. They don't ever age out. They may choose to go home. They may choose to do other things, but they will always have a home. So that's the influence of our grandmother's group. So that's basically what I'm working with. And I worked for years trying to get, ICWA, that issue. That's a long another story, but that's when I learned about what was going on with the politics behind it and how each state government just goes around ICWA and that type of thing. So all the work we tried to do and stuff, that's when I realized that we got to start just doing our own thing outside of any kind of federal project or program. Just do what we can to get it done for the children.
And for those who may not be familiar, ICWA stands for the Indian Child Welfare Act. It was put in place, was it the 70s, Madonna?
Yeah, the 70s.
Yeah, so ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act, was the response to how many Native children were being taken from their communities and put into primarily white Christian homes. It's a assimilation process that the government really still takes part in to this day. So Shaila, I know that you're coming to us from so-called Canada, and we have a lot of the similar issues in Canada and the US, but do you want to speak about it a bit? I know you are a human trafficking survivor yourself.
Yes, I am a human sex trafficking survivor. And in Toronto right now, I'm working as a youth program coordinator at an Indigenous youth agency that is governed by the youth and for the youth. And we serve ages 12 and just before it was 12 to 24. We recently, last board meeting, youth council meeting, we upped the age to 29, which is really awesome because we know that, after that age, some of our youth still have mental health issues, things like this that they are dealing with. And it's very hard, especially in Toronto, anywhere. It's so hard for our Indigenous youth, especially in the cities, right? Especially with the culture shock, things like that they're dealing with. But no, yes, we have a lot of the same issues. I remember a couple of years ago, we had one board meeting, and we were dealing with a lot with my type of work. I facilitate programs, and I'll get other facilitators to just do things that will be beneficial for our youth that are at risk. Maybe we'll assist them in the justice system processes. We'll help them get housing. We'll get them so many different things. And a lot of times I have dealt with children and youth that are in the child welfare system. And this is something that is still, this is the thing that really bothers me sometimes when people say, oh, I'm sure we've all heard as Indigenous people, oh, why can't you guys get over it? Colonization has happened so long ago. And that's just not true. We're still dealing with these issues, these same exact issues, right? Our children are still being taken from their families. A lot of women here, if they have mental health issues or addiction issues, and they're pregnant and they're giving birth in our hospital, some of them will get flagged right away for their babies to be taken away from them, ripped out of their arms right as soon as they have given birth. And it's very tragic. And sorry, my dog is here. I know he's whining, but he just needs so much attention. That dog has been with me throughout so many traumatic experiences in my life that he's now considered an emotional support animal. So, but yeah, so he's here with me now, and his name is Larry, if you guys want to know. But yes, as I was saying, we do have a lot of the same issues up here, and it's just really, it really does bother me still that, you know, that people still don't understand there's that racism, there's that ignorance.
Mhm.
And yes, we're having the same exact issues as you guys are. And I remember during that board meeting that I was telling you about, somebody had come, apparently there was something going on in the 80s, where some lady had said that there was this program where if a woman was having trouble raising her own child, that they would actually have a worker to come in and help her raise her child, and she would be paid like a personal support worker almost. And but that they had gotten rid of that. You know, the mother would still be raising her daughter even with her addiction, but there would be that other worker there with her. You know, and when our kids are being taken away from their families and put in these non-indigenous homes, we know that they lose their culture, like you said, the assimilation. And today, when a child is taken away in Ontario, I think a foster care parent can make up to $5,000 off of that one child,
Mhm.
right? And think of if we put that money towards rehabilitating that mother, you know, we would never have, we would, it would cost the government way less money. It would, you know, it would be so beneficial to all parties. And that's just not what the government is doing, which what we know, you know. And I feel like, you know, they're still practicing these old uh these old ways that are just not good for our people, you know. These tactics, and I truly believe that it is on purpose, the systemic racism, right? And nothing is really being done about it. And that was in some of the calls to justice and the recommendations that we had handed off to the prime minister, or that I had. But I wasn't alone in doing that. I was on the National Family Advisory Circle. My mom was, and it was a whole team of family members of women and family members of people who have gone missing or murdered. But yes, it was that was a very difficult day. And you know, it does seem like it has been swept under the rug sometimes, so that those calls to justice are there on the link that I had sent, the mmwg-ffada.ca. So those calls to justice are there, and so it's, as well as the recommendations as well.
Would you, Shaila, and this is Jen speaking, would you tell us a little bit about what the inquiry report is, since, you know, some of our audience members may not know?
Okay, so over the course of about 3 years, okay, let me start from the very beginning. So this is, I know it is. So over the past, I don't know how many decades, Indigenous women have been rallying across Canada and the United States for basically an inquiry into where our women are going, because we know our women are going missing at exponentially higher rates than you know, non-Indigenous. And the non-Indigenous are our European brothers and sisters. They when one of them goes missing, it's plastered everywhere. You know, like it's everywhere. There's an Amber Alert right away. Maybe, you know, it's on. She's on a billboard, or she's on a milk carton, or you know, that girl is found a lot quicker, right? And people care, you know. But when it's an Indigenous woman, you don't really hear anything like that in the news. And so that was really that has been going on for decades. I mean, since colonization, right? Even back during colonization, I think Christopher Columbus was talking about how valuable women were, Indigenous women were to be sold as slaves, as sex slaves, and you know, that continued on for hundreds of years. And so now you know, there was so many, I was raised around so many women, Indigenous women that were very strong women, right? Because I had gone missing when I was 18 years old. And so my mom, she obviously, as a mother of a missing daughter, you know, you kind of go crazy. I can't even explain what my mom felt. And when I think about that, it kind of makes me want to cry. Because, you know, I'd never, you know, who means for that to happen, really. But you know, and that's just not something I never want my mom to feel pain, you know. So, but you know, when I went missing, my mom had asked for help from her community, and you know, she met this woman named Gladys Raddick, and she's done about 7 walks across Canada on one leg, and she's raised a lot of awareness around Canada and all over Turtle Island, basically, as an activist, because her niece Tamara Chipman, she went missing off of the Highway of Tears. I'm not sure how many people know or have heard of the Highway of Tears, but it's a highway in British Columbia where a lot of women, Indigenous women, had gone missing and had fallen victim to the pig farmer Robert Picton. And so she became good friends with my mom during that time. And you know, I would kind of, she was always raising awareness about MMIWG and even talking about human sex trafficking. And during that time, I was kind of back and forth. Sometimes, like, I was so caught up because during that time, they had really just destroyed my whole entire spirit down through trafficking and through drugs. And so I would periodically go and visit my mom, and this woman would be there, and I didn't really understand what she was doing. I didn't really understand even what human sex trafficking was because I was so brainwashed during that time. But I seen my mom and Gladys going to rallies, and Gladys, this powerful Indigenous woman from British Columbia that was speaking so eloquently, and she was so proud. And you know what, I started to learn more about what was happening to me, and I started to get educated. And after a while, I just got really mad. You know, before it's like you go through different stages of emotion. After I got away from my traffickers, I was really scared for years to even talk about what had happened to me. I didn't even speak about it to my own father. Only recently I started talking to him about it, and it has happened such a long time ago. But I for so long I carried that shame like it was my fault, like I had done something wrong. But I realize now that it had nothing to do with me, and that I was vulnerable, and I was, you know, it was just, it had nothing to do with me. It's not my fault. I know that now. But you know, I just remember being sad, and then being around all these strong Indigenous women, like really brought my spirits up, and they made me feel proud, you know, to be Indigenous. And it took me a long time for me to build up that strength to even say it out loud what had happened to me, right? Because I was so ashamed, right? But you know, these being around these, I didn't really understand who Gladys was, to be honest with you. And then I remember just sitting in the backyard with her, and we were eating sushi, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go do a radio interview and, you know, talk about MMIWG." And I was like, I'm like, who the heck is this woman? Who does she think she is? And then but yeah, it was, you know, she taught me so much. And I just remember going to rallies with her and with my mother, and then I started getting really into it. I was like making signs, my mom was making banners, and you know, so we started rallying, and we started, you know, taking up space and shutting down highways, and you know, taking up Yonge and Dundas Square. So Toronto is basically like Canada's New York City, right? So Yonge and Dundas is like Times Square, right? So we went there and we took up space there quite a few times, and it just made me feel so powerful, and it gave me like, and I've even lost friends through trafficking, right? One of my friends, Jessica, who I grew up with in high school, she's not Indigenous, but we grew up in the same complex, and she went missing and she's never been found. And so it bothers me, you know, that these things keep happening to our women and to our children. And we just kept on fighting. And then one day we got the government to say, oh, well, maybe we should look into this. So we finally got our inquiry. And so then we worked on our government got a task force together, and it was called the National Inquiry, right? So the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And they asked a specific grassroots leaders that had been protesting and you know, making noise, basically the trailblazers. So that included Gladys and my mom and quite a few other family members of women who have gone missing or who had gone murdered. And so that was a really big thing for our families. And it was an honor to have worked on that. For about 3 years, we had worked on that, and they had flown us out everywhere across Canada. I had gone like all the way out to BC, even to St. John's, Newfoundland, and in between there, Winnipeg. I was flown out. You know, they had brought us different places to witness and hear testimonies from different, you know, frontline workers that basically they gathered different testimonies from women across Canada, and then different hearings from, you know, frontline workers that were working in homeless shelters, basically frontline workers and the police, and they interviewed many different people across Canada, trying to come up with a solution. What is going on here? What is happening? Why is this happening? And basically, there's so many different things systemically that are going wrong in our systems. And when it even, especially with the police, the way things are documented and statistics are taken, even though there's women missing, you know, even though we have all these statistics, sorry, I can't talk right now. Even though we have all these statistics, there's so many other women out there that are missing, and it's not even reported, you know. So it's just, and especially we're not even thinking about, you know, women in that might have been murdered, but it is labeled an accident because nobody cared enough to, you know, do a real police report, or, you know what I mean? So it was very hard with the inquiry, and to hear so many different testimonies from so many different families and women, and it was very difficult. And then at the end, it was very emotional process. It was one of the I'll never forget that in my entire life. It was one of the most hardest things to bear witness to. And you know what, I'm glad that I met the people that I did, and I got to share my truth and meet all these beautiful people, and I got to see how beautiful my country is. But I got to see so much pain, and you know, all of that stems from residential school. It's all intertwined together, and it's just all comes down to colonization, and it is and racism. That is why our women are going missing. And you know what I like to say, it's racism and poverty, and the fact that our women are so beautiful, and so are our children, and our culture is so beautiful. That's what I always say. Because a lot of people say, it's because you guys are, you know, drug addicts, or you guys are dirty Indians, or, you know, you guys do it to yourselves. And I say, no, you know what, that's not true. That, you know what it is because our women are so beautiful. We have such beautiful culture. We have the most drop dead gorgeous women in the world, and we have a beautiful culture, and we have such beautiful hearts. And you know, but we're so strong, and we can get through anything. And I truly believe that wholeheartedly, and that our people will persevere, because you know what, we're still here. You know, you can't get rid of us that easily. And you know what, it's just, yeah. So we have to keep fighting, keep making noise, keep taking up spaces, and, you know, and help each other, you know, and help each other and love each other. And that's honestly, that's basically what the report was. It had many different things are in that. It's hard to explain because there's so much in there that you would have to read the report and our calls to Justin to really understand what there, because there's so many things in there that I don't want to I don't want to miss one thing, you know. So, but yeah, so that's basically what happened. And I remember too when I was speaking, because I was so nervous. I'm a little nervous now too still. But you know, people are like, oh, you speak, you must be so strong and so brave and, you know, so confident. And I'm like, no, I have such bad anxiety, you know, still to this day. You know, I'm just a regular, in my head I'm like a regular person still, right? I mean, we all are. That's my teachings, right? You know, that's our we have our grandfather teachings as Anishinaabe, and I really try to follow those every single day of my life, right? Smudge every day, and just that's what helped me get through so much trauma in my life was my culture and my community, and the grandmothers and our elders and the strong women around me, basically. So yeah, that's what the report was about, and that's who I got to work with it on. And you know, it was an amazing experience, and we just need to keep pushing those calls to justice. You know what? And you know what? When I handed over those recommendations to the Prime Minister, we shared words, and it was broadcast live across Turtle Island. It was broadcast internationally all over the world, and but we had leaned in and we had exchanged some words, and you know, cameras couldn't pick that up, and people were like, what did you guys say? And but I said, you better do something about this. you know, I said to him, I was like, make sure you do something about this, because this was our baby for, you know, 3 years. Putting this together was very difficult, and you better make sure you do something about this. And he said, we will together. So I'm just, I think I should call up a couple of reporters and say, hey, what's going on, Mr. Prime Minister? Like, you said we would do something, but then this whole pandemic happened, and you know, we could never have foreseen this. So I just worry sometimes that it has gone brushed under the rug, and you know, so because those issues are still there, and it's even harder more than ever to help our communities. Like as a frontline worker, you know, facilitating programming, I, you know, work in a drop-in space, and you know, where we help and we give food during the day to our youth, and you know, just try to help them find jobs or go to school or whatever that is. And it's so difficult now to help with all of these restrictions that we have. It's been very difficult right now, and we know a lot of our youth and women, and you know, our single mothers, they have mental health issues, and it's just, and especially the opioid pandemic has gone up now. We are having more people die from drug overdose now more than ever, you know, due to the isolation. And it's just been very difficult for everybody across the world, you know, so it's just a really hard time now for us here. And yeah, it's hopefully that, you know, hopefully we pray that this ends soon. So yeah.
This is Jen speaking. So a couple of things that Shaila brought up, I want to just explain to people who are with us today that maybe aren't familiar with these terms. Turtle Island is a term that is used by many Indigenous people to instead of the term North America. So we call North America Turtle Island.
Yes.
Yes. And then Shaila had also mentioned residential schools. They're called residential schools in Canada, and in the US, they're called boarding schools. Well, these weren't fancy boarding schools that you send children to. These were institutions that stole our children from our communities, forced them into these schools where they cut their hair, you know, made them take Christian names. They weren't allowed to speak their languages. The horrible abuses and things happened at these schools. In the US, there are some of the boarding schools still open. So this has been an ongoing problem for Indigenous people since the white invasion. Is just our children being taken from us in a variety of ways. So here in the US, we have constant issues with jurisdiction, like who has jurisdiction over our lands. And it's a very complicated system of public policy and Supreme Court case law. But I'd love to have Madonna talk a bit about this, the way things like the Oliphant Supreme Court case or the Dollar Tree case has impacted our abilities to find our children or to hold abusers accountable. So Madonna, would you talk to us a bit about that and the ways that, you know, you and the grandmothers group are trying to combat that?
Okay, I think the basic thing is the issue of accountability, because there isn't any. The state of South Dakota has made many, legal orphans because our tribal governments don't have the ability to combat these issues on a legal basis or political whatever. So it's very hard to try to get any kind of meaningful policy change, or I mean, even on the tribal council level, let alone the state, for child protection, and those kind of terms are overused, I think, by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, by all the programs and agencies that are supposed to be accountable, child protection it's just a term. So that's one of the main reasons over years of facing those kind of hurdles, That's why we decided that, look, we got to just forget all that. Let's start at the community level and let's just start doing what we can to try to some kind of restoration of some sort. Because it's true, the boarding school system, clear back to my grandmother, who was in a boarding school, and I'm 80 years old, and I'm the last generation of that hardcore boarding school system that we went through. And it was, it just completely destroyed the whole way of child raising. And ever since then, it was handed down that the lack of child raising skills, and the original child raising methods are long gone. That's why we're so susceptible to this modern day, to you name it, all the deviant behavior of the largest society hits us, harder, because we're colonized people and because of that, the system of federal Indian policy. So the result is, like my own mother, she came from the boarding school system when they were still, the boarding school system in the United States was still under the War Department when my mother was in the boarding school. And then in the 1930s, they did practically an overnight change, and when they started the Indian Reorganization Act, 1934, and they, did an about change, and they started so when my mother was in high school, it was almost like she was in college because they had the different curriculum. I mean, she was 14 years old. She was on a tennis team that they sent all the white women that were going to the Olympics. They sent them clear out to Flanju, South Dakota, to play tennis against the Indian girls because they were the best. But of course, there's no record of it in those days. They didn't keep those kind of records. So, I mean, that's just an idea. I'm just to let you know, that each generation has to go through. So my mother was there during the Great Depression of the 30s. So she stayed there year round at the boarding school. And in the summertime, she worked down in the town, and she worked in where they fix hair, whatever they call it. Anyway, one of those places. And there was a woman that would come in once a week to have her hair done, and she'd always ask for my mother, and then she'd tip her. And to me, this is so important. you know, when you're telling things of why people are the way our people are the way they are. She would tip my mother 50 cents. And that was a lot of money back then in the 30s. And she sent all her tips and her pay to home to my grandmother. So this woman's name was Madonna. That's how I got the name. You know, because I used to say, oh, I'd have to literally fist fight sometime because of my name when I was growing up. Everybody made fun of it, you know? And I thought, why did you name me this? You know, anything, name me anything but, you know? And finally she sat me down and told me. And after that, I thought, wow, you know, and I was a kid, but I still, it, you know, it really made an impression on me, you know, what my mother had gone through. So, but she was hardcore because she was raised in that boarding school system of time. I'm never late. They laugh about Indian time, not me, not my generation. You know, if they said a certain time, 3 o'clock, you know, or 3:30, get on that Zoom, man, I'm sitting here, you know, not because I want to be, but be on time and be, you know, that's just who I am now, because I was raised by a mother who was raised in that boarding school system. And clean, we knew how to clean
Mhm.
on our hands and knees. We didn't use, there was no such thing as using this miracle stuff that you just spray and wipe up. We had to scrub, because that's how my mother was raised in a boarding school. So, you know, it was all about behavior. She didn't care about curriculum. She didn't care about any of that, because that wasn't what boarding school was, to teach you really the basics they were taught, but it was more about, you know, brainwashing. So she had no parenting skills, really, you know. It was just all about, you know, what she knew. And it was kind of passed on to me, you know, but luckily I came about as a young woman in the late 60s and the early 70s with the 70s with the American Indian movement. And that's what kind of saved me, because it helped me see how you do in a group, you know, outside of regulation. So it helped me a lot with raising children and trying to see, because at the time I didn't know. I never thought about it, you know. So that, yeah, that, you know, it's just a real intergenerational, you know, way of understanding and then accepting that you got to change. You got to do it. You know, ain't no program, or there's nobody else that's going to do it. You got to just do it as an individual and keep that family strong, that support. That's what I do. No such thing as burnout in my world, because I have a support system that my core family, my extended family, my community on my reservation, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I went to the site of the first boarding school in the US. It's in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and it's now the site of the Army College of War, or the Army War College. And I mean, they had a guard station there, and you know, it's like, you know, that guard station was there to make sure the children didn't leave. They couldn't leave, they weren't allowed to. You know, if children left, they were hunted down like they're criminals, you know. And it was so upsetting too to see this site. It was started by a man, Richard Henry Pratt. He is the man who said, "Kill the Indian, save the man," which became a whole host of policy and such. And when I went to that site of the Carlisle boarding school, the signs they had up, the historical markers, were just so inaccurate. I mean, they were just in many ways blatant lies. And there was even a memorial to Pratt. And when I saw that memorial, I was so overwhelmed with just anger, just rage that all of these horrible things had happened on this site not that long ago that are still impacting us today, you know, through intergenerational trauma. And here we are giving a memorial to the man who was responsible for this. You
Oh
know,
my
it just, it, and that's, you know, Shayla, I think it was you who said, you know, that we natives get told, just get over it
Oh
already.
yeah, all the time.
Well, I mean, one, I don't think we should ever get over genocide and colonization, even if it hasn't
Yeah.
happened for a long time. We need to remember and honor that, but
Oh yeah.
it hasn't stopped for us,
Oh
you know.
no, it hasn't. And you know what? But look at what happened. The genocide to the Jewish. Would you tell them to get over it? No, no. We have the like events, and but we don't have that same thing for our own. And I believe that more children were murdered than that genocide. We lost more Indigenous people than the Jewish, you know. But they're recognized. Theirs is recognized as a genocide, and ours isn't, right? And I remember that day when we handed it out, when I handed that off to the Prime Minister, the recommendations. He recognized what had happened to us as a genocide, and it was all over the news. And that kind of foreshadowed what we had done, but it was still, you know, at least we had that gratification that it was considered genocide now what had happened to us here. And echoing on what Madonna has said, that basically describing like the cycle of abuse, right? My grandparents went to residential school, and my grandmother, you know, my mother told me stories of how much internalized racism she had felt after going through residential school, or boarding school is what you lovely American people down there call it. But we should just call it just devil school or something terrible, like not something, not like boarding in residential school makes it sound like, you know, it was like a great place or something, when we know damn well
Yeah, it makes it sound
oh
like it's some
yeah,
fancy place that the rich
oh
kids
yeah,
go
oh
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a great movie called We Were Children. I'm not sure who's all heard of that, but it's really great. Oh, it's not really great, it's very sad. Just warning to you all, it's very sad. But yes, no, I had another point to make. Oh yes, okay, so yes, so even then my grandmother, she married my grandfather. He's not my real grandfather, but I consider him that because they had like a what is it, a Brady Bunch family where so, but so his 3 kids were taken away from his previous marriage and put into foster care. And then my mother's older adopted brother, he was 4 years old when he was returned to the family with my grandmother. My grandmother was only 18 years old. And she had my mother already, and then she was adopting his 3 kids. And then and I don't even think she had a grade 10 education, and she is raising these 4 kids, and he comes back with gonorrhea at 4 years old. Oh. And then he starts sexually abusing my mother until she had gotten her period. So that's just like, that's what Indigenous people are going through. Like, that's just one story, you know, like that's just one story of you know, of the horrible things that we know were going on in those schools. It is the sexual abuse from the priests and the nuns. There was even one story I heard come out that a nun had kicked this kid in the face. I seen it. Where did I see? I can't, it was an article that I had read of this one testimony of an elder where they had said that they seen a nun kick this girl in the face, this like 4-year-old girl, or in the head, and she snapped her neck, and then she told the kids to just leave and walk over her as they exited the class, and disposed of her tiny little body. You know, that's just one story. This is another story. Like, you know how many other stories that are there that are dying out with our elders, you know, and nothing is being done about it. Nobody will ever know. They'll take it to their grave, because you know what, I know that my own grandfather, he had suffered immense sexual abuse as well in those schools, and he will never talk about it, though. We don't know exactly what happened, but we do know that there was sexual abuse and there was physical abuse, and he is you know, it's just it 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 makes me so, I don't even want to start talking about it even anymore, because it literally makes me so so much rage. And especially as an Indigenous person, you know, growing up in a big city, you know, well, I haven't always lived in Toronto, but you know, I know that it's so hard. People just don't understand how hard it is as an Indigenous person to walk in a concrete jungle, and
Mm.
you know, there's people doing way better than you that aren't your people, and you just have all of these systemic these intergenerational blood memory, these traumas passed down through your veins, you know, and the mental health issues that go along with that, you know. My grandfather, he wasn't the best father to his children, and that cycle of abuse, that discipline that he learned in that residential school, he inflicted upon his own children, right? The physical abuse, right? And that gets stemmed down through generation, and that's generation and generation, and then it's called the cycle of abuse, right? That our families we have, right? And but we, you know, my mom, she wasn't the best mom that she could have been, and that's what made me vulnerable as a young woman, you know, to traffickers, you know, always running away, you know, not having that bond with my mother, you know. She would, you know, my they never said I love you, you know. My grandparents to my mother, you know, it's just those things, those sacred things, that love, that nurturingness, that these generations missed out on, and that we are not passing down to our younger generations, right? And it's that cycle of abuse. But I believe that this generation, I think we're finally we're making more noise, and that's what is really amazing and wonderful to see across all the nations, you know. And I'm seeing it even in, you know, in the South Americas, you know, even down there, you know, they're starting to make their noise. You know, we're starting to recognize, and we're starting to get educated, and you know, what is that? I seen a meme or whatever you call it, like there's nothing more dangerous than an educated Indian, right? You know, and it's like a girl in her jingle dress reading a textbook, right? And that was such a powerful image to me, because I was like, oh yeah, right on. And but yeah, so it's such a big problem. And you know, it's being echoed, and I feel that our time is now, right? It's, you know, I feel like you know, before people used to be almost afraid to be an Indigenous, you know, and especially for my grandmother, you know. I remember getting really mad because up here we have status cards. We have our certificate of Indian status, and we don't have to pay a certain amount of tax on our purchases, right? And like sometimes when you take that card out, and because for them to take off the tax, people get really really racist sometimes. And I remember seeing that with my grandmother, and I remember getting really mad. I didn't understand really. I remember being a little girl and like just yelling at the cashier, you know, that's not right, you know. But now I have my status card. I'm always waiting for somebody to say something like that. But no, it's or where was I going with this? But yeah, no, oh yeah, I feel like it's our time now, right? I feel like, you know, our people are gaining our strength, and all that intergenerational trauma is slowly getting healed, and it's you know, it's not going away, because it will always be there. And I think that's what makes our people so strong, is that we fight on, and we fight hard. You know, we were warriors once, you know, and I always love to remind our youth of that, you know, because I deal with a lot of at-risk youth that are out there on the streets, living on the streets sometimes. And I always say to them, remember, we were warriors once, you know. And you know, so I'm like, but don't go scalping people, you know. You know. But yeah, no, so I feel like we're getting that back. It's never been cooler to be Native now than now, you know. It's a different time, and I'm just, you know, these things that we're afraid to say is that we're saying those things now, you know. And I'm just glad for that.
So some of what you talked about, Shayla, um, you mentioned, sort of how it's cool to be Native now, but it wasn't a few generations back.
Yeah.
I remember my father telling me that my great grandpa Deerinwater was ashamed to be an Indian, and he tried to hide it as much as he could. And, as I've learned more about my people's history and then just Indigenous people in general, it's like, well, there probably was that internalized racism, that shame, but it was also probably a survival strategy. Our communities were criminalized, our ways were criminalized. My people do something called stomp dances, and it's a type of ceremony for us, but that was criminalized. So I think it used to be a situation where you really had to hide that you were Indigenous, or you were just going to be murdered.
Yeah.
Which is sadly not to say that we don't still have those problems, but it does feel different now, and it feels different for me. So I'm 41. It feels different for me now as a Native than it did when I was a kid growing up in Oklahoma, where I was just one of those dirty Indian kids.
Yeah.
But it feels different now, and I feel like like Idle No More movement in Canada, and then we had the No Dapple resistance here, and so forth. I feel like it's kind of bringing our people back. It's bringing us back to the old ways and to the ancestors. Madonna, I know that you did a lot of work during the No Dapple resistance pipeline camps at Oshedi Shikoe, just working with the youth there. And we know that our youth were also a really big part of that movement. What have you seen come out of that since then?
Well, the key thing for us, grandmothers, when we we were asked to come up, actually. I got a call from Phyllis Young from Standing Rock, and she said, "You got to come up here. We need help. With this camp, it's growing overnight." And she said, "We need some people that know how to organize." And of course, we're all old members of the American Indian movement. That's what we did back in the day. We went around mostly in caravans, but we always had to set up camp for 200-300 people, and it was so that's how my family, we ended up going up there. But what we saw and what we did was, I felt was important, because we know it's intergenerational struggle. So what do elders do? What I remember back in the 60s, the American Indian movement, when we were in confrontation, what we call confrontational politics with the United States government and any government, state, county, whatever, we were up against. We always had our elders. They were always there. They'd show up. They had our back. They never said anything. They never tried to, tell us, "Oh, you're not doing this right," or they just said, "You know what? We're here to support you." And that was so powerful for us then when we were young, because we were naive. We were just learning how to organize, that type of thing. So it was really important for us, because we knew that we had that support of our people. So we were never separate. It was never, "Oh, the young people are raising hell." It was families, elders to little ones, and that was the American Indian movement. So that's what I learned from them. So when we went to Standing Rock, that's what we did. We were there. We'd go to the community meetings. We'd go to their different camp areas and where the young people were organized and what they were doing. And we just show up to let them know that we were there and we were in total support. We had their back, that was the main thing. But what we noticed too was how everybody got along. I mean, there was an influx of every Indigenous person in the Western Hemisphere sent a delegation, and we got to see them and greet them. But not only that, the non-natives that came in droves. And it was like everybody helped everybody. It was just a community of mostly young people. And my sister and I would and we had our camp kind of up on the only hill. They called it Facebook Hill, because it was the only one where you could get, anyway, reception. So that's where we would, we were, and we could watch the smoke trails in the morning, of all the camps. And everybody was like one big family. It didn't matter where you came from or who you were. If you were there, you were a water protector. So that was the main thing. So when we got home, my son and my oldest daughter and son, they inherited land from their father. It's right across the road from where I live, 90 acres. And he said, all right, we want to camp like what happened up at Standing Ground, but more of a permanent. And I said, you mean that's what we learned to, decolonize? That was kind of a word that went around up at camp. So more people understood what that meant. So we said, yeah, decolony. We could call it a decolony, get off the grid, that type of thing. So that's what we're doing. They're making use of their land. By my daughter, she's a nutritionist. She's into the traditional foods, and she's into growing, whatever, the organic, that type of thing. So all of those come into play, So that's what was taken from that camp, and the allies that were made, all the non-natives that came, and all the non-native people that supported and sent supplies. And that's a network that is the strength of everybody in this country, because, whether, regardless of what the politics, and if they're, everybody's got to drink water. And if Nestle decides that, they want legislation that says, well, you got to buy it from us, there's no free water for anybody. I mean, come on, it's got to be everybody's. So that's what I learned mainly.
Yeah, so we're going to start taking questions from people. So either put your question in the chat or hit the raise your hand button and someone will come to you. I want to mention Nestle. So the Nestle company, they've basically just gone in and taken water from Lake Michigan almost practically for free. And then they're turning around and bottling it and selling it back to us. And, I, along with community organizing, I'm a journalist. I do a lot of research and coverage around environmental justice issues. And for me, I'm like, okay, we're destroying water through the fracking process to create plastic so that we can have plastic bottles that Nestle takes stolen water and puts in, and then we have to buy back.
And we don't even have, we don't even have clean drinking water on some of our reserves still. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think too, like as we're just waiting on some questions to come in, I think too, it's also important to point out that all of the fracking, the oil, all that resource extraction, it brings what we call man camps to our lands. And man camps are basically these big makeshift sort of housing sites for the out-of-town workers who work on these projects. And most of them, they're overwhelmingly non-native. They are not from the area. And these man camps end up just creating and bringing a lot of violence. They bring drugs, they bring alcohol. Our women and children are more likely to be trafficked and go missing and murdered through those camps. And it's just this big cycle, it's like you can't talk about fracking and not talk about this genocide and then the water being stolen and sold by Nestle. It's just a big circular pattern of just capitalist colonialist nonsense. So do we have any questions here? Okay, so I don't see any questions yet.
Yeah, we're having those same man camp problems up here too, and even Nestle taking our water too up here.
Oh, they are? I didn't know that.
Yeah. We that was actually in the report too. In the recommendations was the man camps, because same problem. Same women are getting trafficked from those man camps as well up here. And it is just crazy. And most of them are non-Indigenous. They're white. Most of them. And they're out there in the bush or whatever, and. An exotic native woman. Sorry, buddy, you're the exotic one. Settle down.
And something that really that really gets to me about like the man camps. So, you know, you have Trudeau who takes, you know, excuse me, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who takes this murdered and missing inquiry report. And then down here in the so-called US, we have politicians like Senator Heidi Heitkamp or Senator Lisa Murkowski that, you know, they claim to care about Native women and Native children, and oh, we're going to pass legislation to protect the sisters, and then they turn around and support the pipelines that bring the man camps, which bring the violence. You know, it all kind of feels like it's just an act, you know, it's this idea. Yeah.
Well, you know what? We have 2 man camps threatening our border right now, our western border of our reservation, because of the KXL pipeline. They're pushing it through. They're not supposed to be doing construction, but they're stockpiling, and they've already got the man camps built. And those are, so the grandmothers group, the younger ones, the OGs, they started a group called Najo, and that means, in our language, that means whistle in alarm. Okay, like a warning. So that's what we're doing in the communities, is, you know, they're doing Najo, so that in case you see a car, you know, someone driving around, a van or something. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep,
okay.
I can hear you. Sorry, I was just.
I know you were looking like you were, something was wrong.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out questions in the chat box. That's all. But please,
I see.
go
Okay,
on, Madonna.
I'm sorry. But anyway, yeah, that's another issue that we're working on, you know, to protect, because we got to do it ourselves. But Najo, they have a working relationship with the tribal police because they're under, you know, funded, and they don't have enough, you know, police officers to run the whole run around. So we have groups going out maybe once in a while, whenever we can, some of them on horseback, you know, just patrolling the border, just as to let anybody know, you know. Plus we have checkpoints, health checkpoints on our reservation because of COVID, but they're helping also in holding down that trafficking. We've noticed that. Because the checkpoints, it's almost like the word's gone out now. They're saying stay away from Cheyenne River Reservation because they have checkpoints, you know. And what they do is they just get all your information so they can track you if you end up having COVID. So they're not stopping anybody, but I mean, you know, the traffic moves, but they get all the information and the license plate and everything. So it's really, you know, the trafficking has really almost disappeared that we know of, you know.
Well, that's a really, sorry, this is Jen speaking. That's a really amazing outcome from the checkpoints that I had never thought about. That's incredible. So we do have a question here from Allison. So Allison wrote, I remember learning about Indigenous babies in some Latin American countries being taken by hospital staff and sent to the US for adoption by mostly white families. I feel like this was not that long ago. Do these things still happen? And what are your reflections on that? I'll say that tomorrow, for tomorrow's 3 R's event, we are going to have Yobana Milan Bustos, who is Afro and Indigenous from Colombia. And then on Thursday's event, we'll also have Albanese Ferrer TK, who is also Indigenous from Colombia. And so they would be able to speak more to the specific Latin American piece. But, you know, I'll say we know that children from across the world, children of color, including Indigenous children, are being basically sold off through US adoption processes. So
yeah.
Madonna, Shaila, would you both like to weigh in on that question?
Sure, go ahead.
Oh no, you go. My elders first, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, in South Dakota, like I said before, the state of South Dakota has created legal orphans, because if they're under 3 years old, they go practically overnight to adoption. So what they do is they terminate the perennial rights, and it's usually a young single parent. And because we've gotten, you know, feedback from that, and a lot of times they'll say, you know, this one grandmother read in the paper, a small thing at the bottom inside in the paper in Rapid City, she said, look at this. And it was her 3 grandchildren that were up for adoption. And then the mother was panicking. She said, wait, how can this happen? She never could get a hold of her social worker. But anyway, to make a long story short, they hadn't sent her. They said, we tried to get a hold of you and we couldn't for your court hearing, and you didn't show up, so we terminated your rights. And that's what they usually say. We don't have how to get a hold of you. You say, wait a minute, you have my address, you have my phone number, and I tried to call my social worker. Well, you better come down here and get this copy of the report, for your hearing. After the children were adopted, they were trying to get her to pick up that paper so she could say she was told, and she wouldn't. She said, wait a minute, no, I'm not, So that's the system, and it's all for money. In the years before that, they could care less about Indian children. They didn't want nothing to do with us, But then when they figured that through federal funding and the pharmaceutical companies have such influence in Congress that they were saying, okay, we're going to up the amount of money you're going to get for each child. The Native children will be automatically labeled as special needs. So then they get like sometimes twice or triple the amount of money for these children. And the pharmaceuticals get their cut because they're selling all these drugs to the state of South Dakota so they can keep the children drugged so they won't run away. I mean, it's a system that's still going on. It's bad.
It's so bad. It's happening here too. The same things are happening up here too. And I was just thinking, like, it doesn't seem that long ago as these things are still happening. Yes. And I think the last residential school that was closed down up here was like in the 80s in Saskatchewan, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, like that's not at all that long ago, like these things still keep happening, and even recently I was watching a documentary about trafficking in Mexico, like right along the border, right?
Oh.
Right along. Oh, do you know what I'm talking about, Madonna? Oh my God, it was so horrifying, the things that are happening to the children and Indigenous children. Like down there, like we have Indigenous people all over the South Americas too, right? And they're treated just as bad, if not even worse, because they're living in even worse conditions than we are, right? So and like I know my people here are being treated really bad, but it's so much worse like other places too, right? And but that doesn't make it any less worse, right? But and it's just it's horrifying, the things that are happening, and it's just, and I think too, the things that are like, especially the trafficking, like a lot of people don't want to talk about it. It's so horrific and horrendous, and it, to think people don't want to realize like what's really going on, right? Like people don't want to pay any attention to that, or like I know sometimes sometimes when I'm speaking at an event, like I always hate it when they ask me to like if there's somebody speaking before me, like if they ask me to sit like by the stage or whatever while I'll wait for the next person to finish, right? Because then everybody sees the pictures and the bio and they see that I had gone through such horrific things, right? And then the audience is like staring at me and I'm like sitting there off to the side waiting for my turn to go up, and people were like, oh my God, holy Christ, like, or pardon my French, sorry. but people are like, holy moly, like people are just staring at me, and it's just people don't really, it's just so hard for them to fathom these things happening, and these things happen all the time, and it's just craziness.
So we have come almost to the end of our conversation. God, there was so much more stuff I wanted to talk with you all about, because there's just so much to talk about.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about.
But do you either of you have any final thoughts, anything you want to share, anything?
Boy, I don't know, we just gotta keep just we gotta keep fighting. We gotta keep making people feel uncomfortable with our stories. And you know what? Thank you for everybody that has been listening and or watching. And I'm very honored to be a part of this. And it was my pleasure to, talk crap about our governments and, with
Yeah.
pleasure,
Yes.
pleasure. If this happens again, let me know. Anyways, but yeah, Chimiquetch, thanks so much, and yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say.
Madonna, do you have any final parting words for us?
Well, I just think something like this event here, I think, are so important because we get to talk and hear other people, and it's good because for me, in all these years, I doing this kind of stuff, moccasins on the ground stuff, it's always good to hear that young people, especially in the academic world, because that's where we need to have that presence. So I appreciate both of you, what you do is so good, and if nothing else would come out of this plague, it's stuff like this, would we be doing these Zooms, probably not, and so I think that I just appreciate everything that you've done, and good for you. I'm glad to know you, and so thank you very much.
Yeah, I feel the same with both of you. You do amazing work, and I think this is kind of what Indigenous people are. We are resilient, and I think I'll just say for myself, I'm just stubborn. Sometimes I'm just digging my heels in, like I'm gonna keep getting up and going because I know the colonizer doesn't want me to. And we take tragedy and turn it into something beautiful. And I think that is what this conversation has been.
Yeah.
And so with that, I want to say Wado, thank you for everyone who's attended, for Madonna and Shaila for being here, giving their time and their energy and being so open with themselves, with all of us. I want to thank our event volunteers and organizers because there is no way I could have done this without their help. I want to thank all of our interpreters and captioners who are here, making sure that we make this accessible for as many community members as possible. But be sure to join us tomorrow for our panel on murdered and missing Indigenous women, children, and Two-Spirits. We'll be speaking with Elizabeth Carr from the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, Lorraine Clements, who is Anishinaabe from the Treaty 1 territory in so-called Canada, and Yobana Milan Bustos, who works as a defender of Afro-descendant and Indigenous peoples and ethnic women in Colombia. So it's going to be a great conversation. We are now keeping ticket sales open until 1 hour before we start. We start at 6 o'clock Eastern time, so you can get your tickets up until 5. And Crushing Colonialism relies very heavily on the support from our community members and our allies. If you are someone who is in a position to make a donation, we would greatly appreciate that. We always pay our speakers, and we believe in having language and disability access. So donations are always appreciated, and they are tax deductible. And you can make a donation at crushingcolonialism.org/donate. And we're putting that and the link to buy tickets for tomorrow and Friday night's 3 Rs. Those are going to go into the chat. And so now I just want to say Wado, thank you again. And we will see everyone tomorrow. And, keep taking care of yourselves and each other and crushing colonialism every day.
Thank you.
Chimiquetch, thank you so much.